Alibaba just dropped the preview for their new Qwen3.8 Max, and the scale is absolutely massive, a staggering 2.4 trillion parameters. Historically, the Max tier of the Qwen family has been strictly proprietary. If you wanted access, you played in their closed sandbox. That just changed. This marks the first time Alibaba has made its flagship tier AI model open weight. Alibaba claims this model is second only to Fable 5, matching the stated performance of the most capable closed systems. But combining that claim with an unfinished preview tag and a 2.4 trillion parameter footprint leaves developers wondering how to actually deploy it. To figure out if this model is worth your time, we need to separate the excitement of an open weight label from the physical reality of what it takes to turn it on. Loading 2.4 trillion parameters requires a 5-figure enterprise server rack packed with heavy-duty GPUs. For those hoping to squeeze this onto a high-end home workstation through extreme quantization, the math doesn't work out. Crushing the model down to fit consumer hardware degrades its intelligence to the point where smaller, existing open models easily outperform it. This quadrant chart maps hardware accessibility against model capability. Qwen3.8 Max lands right here, in the extreme top right corner. Looking at the massive gap between the consumer hardware zone and the model's position, we see a frontier-level capability completely divorced from consumer accessibility. Since practically no individual is running this model locally, its actual value relies entirely on how it reshapes the cloud hosting market. Right now, when you build an application using a closed ecosystem model, you pay that single vendor directly at the price they dictate. Releasing a 2.4 trillion parameter model as open weight allows independent third-party cloud providers to download the model and serve it from their own infrastructure. This matrix shows exactly what happens next. A single vendor pipeline fractures into multiple parallel hosting options, forcing providers to compete aggressively on execution speed and API pricing to win your business. This structural shift introduces direct competition to the business models of incumbent AI gatekeepers, giving developers leverage they didn't have yesterday. You trade the privacy of running a model locally for a hyper-competitive cloud market where providers fight to offer you the best terms. That is the strategic advantage of adopting Qwen3.8 Max. To track how this translates to practical performance, this dynamic scorecard lays out our evaluation. Based on the hosting shift, we're marking market democratization with a definitive CAS. In our browser OS test, the model successfully drafted a custom, fully functional web user interface entirely from scratch. What stands out is the design language. It produced a highly novel visual layout that avoids the generic, standardized aesthetic we often see from large language models. It also demonstrated strong multimodal capabilities. When handed a screenshot of a broken C++ skateboard game, it analyzed the image, identified the specific coding flaws causing the visual glitches, and accurately patched the code. These specific strengths in visual design and bug identification make this preview build a highly effective tool for rapid front-end ideation and aesthetic exploration. But testing also revealed severe mechanical flaws that explain exactly why Alibaba labeled this release as a preview. In a test to generate a 3D printable CAD model of a V8 engine, it struggled heavily with spatial reasoning. It extruded the core V shape in the wrong orientation, resulting in an incoherent structure. It also faltered with pure algorithmic game physics during the C++ skateboard game generation, requiring heavy intervention to produce a playable result. The model's C++ syntax generation was unstable enough that it actually opted to write a Python script to generate the C++ file for us, rather than handling the complex architecture directly. At this stage, the model lacks the reliability needed for a structural back-end engine. Returning to our scorecard, spatial and systems logic earns a clear fail, validating its status as an unfinished build. Qwen3.8 Max offers a clear alternative to closed vendor monopolies, but it arrives weighed down by highly uneven structural logic. If you are a hobbyist looking to run AI locally, skip this model entirely. Compressing 2.4 trillion parameters for consumer hardware will yield much worse results than simply using an optimized, smaller open model. For developers, do not deploy this specific preview build for tasks requiring precise 3D spatial mapping or deep software architecture. This decision tree lays out your best options. If your project relies on precise spatial logic, your path routes to wait for GA. But if your primary goal is escaping vendor lock-in, your path routes to prep for third-party hosts. Use this preview phase strictly to test front-end UI generation, and focus your efforts on preparing infrastructure to plug into third-party hosts once finalized. Open weight doesn't always mean running a massive model in your living room, but it does guarantee that as a consumer, you retain the power to choose who earns your compute dollars.